Hello and welcome. My name is Kevin McIntyre and I'm the Superintendent of the Milford Public Schools. I have three very special guests with me today to talk about both mental health and chronic absenteeism. We have with us today Victor Canino, who's one of our attendance supervisors, Lisa Kincaid, who's our social emotional learning director, and Josh Otlin, who's our high school principal at Milford High School. If I could have maybe Victor talk a little bit more about your background and experience, and then we'll go to Lisa and then to Josh.
Yeah, how you doing, Kevin? As you know, my background is in federal law enforcement. I worked with the federal courts as a probation officer for 25 years. And prior to that, I worked for the Department of Youth Services for 5 years. And if I recall correctly, before that, I worked at a ROCA, Reaching Out to Chelsea Adolescents, which was a community-based program dealing with pregnant teenage mothers and trying to get them services through the community, and that's pretty much it.
All right, thank you. Lisa?
So I've been working with Milford Public Schools now for 20 years. I started out as the adjustment counselor and served in the roles of assistant principal at both the middle and upper elementary schools. I am a licensed mental health counselor and worked at Wayside Community Counseling Center before entering Milford Public Schools.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Josh?
My background starts in Milford. I went to Milford Public Schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. I started teaching high school in public schools in Massachusetts. Right out of college, I taught high school social studies for 9 years. I served as assistant principal at Hudson High School for 8 years, and I'm now in my 7th year as the principal at Milford High.
All right, thank you, Josh. So the first question I'm going to throw to Lisa, but I want maybe Victor and Josh to jump in as well. We keep hearing in the media about a mental health crisis across the United States, and in particular in our schools. Can you speak to this a little bit?
Sure. I think starting in 2019, we really started to see the rise of our adolescents expressing a lot of anxiety and depression. So then COVID came along, and I think COVID really just exacerbated what we were already seeing. And some of the reasons behind it, definitely we find there may be a mental health history in the family that our students are also predisposed to, so they're struggling with at times. We also see with the financial struggles that our families are having and the stress in the families, we're seeing that really impact our students too. So a lot of our students themselves are taking on the stress and the fear of not being able to, have appropriate housing or afford food. So they're really taking on the stress that they're seeing their parents struggling with. And finally, I think social media has played a big role on that. And research has shown when our students, our adolescents, and our children are on some sort of device for more than 3.5 hours, we're seeing an increase in this anxiety and depression. And a lot of that is linked to, just the bullying that happens on social media, the isolation that takes place. So there's definitely been a rise. And we see that in our school systems because our students are with us most of the day. And so we are really trying to help our students in our schools not only get through the day and academically become prepared and be successful in the classroom, but we're also supporting these other needs that they have that they are presenting with us.
All right, great. Thanks, Lisa. I don't know if Josh or Victor, you want to add anything to that?
Well, from my perspective as a attendance supervisor, all the behaviors Lisa's referring to, my role and my partner's role is to, try to put eyes and ears inside the home and try to bring some sort of understanding to the families about, what are some of the best ways to cope with these kind of stressors that they got going on, and, let Lisa know, what we see. We're kind of the eyes and ears for her in the community in that sense. And, that's, lately my partner and I have noticed all these behaviors are manifesting themselves. They just carry into the school, and we're seeing some pretty, different behavior, shall we say, that are of concern. And I don't, the parents are young too, right? So they're on the computer and they're getting their, isolation time, as it were, on the iPhone. So, it's a big problem, and we're just trying to do the best we can to combat it.
Okay. And Josh, what are you seeing in terms of mental health in particular, or maybe the relationship between mental health and social media? One of the things I know at the state level is there's a big push around limiting phone use. I know technology has really exploded in classrooms, particularly over the last decade. I don't know if you want to comment on any piece of that.
Sure. Yeah, I will speak to that, and I'll sort of let me come to that in a moment. I want to respond to something that Lisa said earlier. I agree with Lisa that the pandemic has exacerbated challenges that we were seeing emerge with young people in the 2000 teens that we hadn't seen previously. I started working in administration 15 years ago. When I was a classroom teacher, I don't think I was very well attuned to the fact that there was a number of students around me who were really struggling with their mental health. I didn't become aware of that until I was an assistant principal. And over the last 15 years, I've seen an increase in the number of young people that are struggling with their mental health, which has been really discouraging to see. I think I've seen the types of challenges that they're presenting with change and evolve over time. And I think that there's a number of different reasons why the numbers are up and why the form has changed a bit. But I think that technology and social media in particular, I think is a really important part of that story. That's, I think, my kind of lived experience as someone who's worked with a lot of young people and a lot of families is, as Lisa mentioned, is been affirmed by research that's come out in just the past couple of years, where it's sort of told a lot of us what we believe to be true, which is that social media has, it's inflicted a lot of damage upon a lot of young people. There's many young people who have used social media and they've emerged more or less unscathed. But it's clear that there's a lot of young people out there for whom social media has caused a lot of damage, and it's negatively impacting their mental health. There is a lot to be said for trying to make schools a place that are something of a sanctuary from all that. And schools have never been easy places for a lot of young people. That's as long as there's been schools, there's been young people who've had difficult experiences in school socially with their peers. I think that if the social challenges that students experience in school are social challenges that are kind of grounded in face-to-face encounters with their peers, I feel like that's probably a lot less dangerous on the whole than a lot of the problems that young people are experiencing with peers and non-peers through social media. I think for a variety of reasons, social media seems to have a particularly powerful impact on many, many young people, and the negative experiences that young people are having on social media seems to be having a very profound impact in ways that I don't think we really have comparison points to at other stages in at least recent history in my career. This is something that is unlike anything I've dealt with in my career.
So we've talked about some of the issues that some of our students are facing, particularly around mental health, around social media. We're going to get to how that impacts attendance in a little bit. But what are we doing to address the mental health issues in the school, Lisa? And what kind of social emotional learning programs are happening across the district? And maybe Josh, I'll have you comment on what's happening particularly at the high school, if that works.
Sure. So we, in each of our schools, we have adjustment counselors. And so the role of the adjustment counselor is really to help any student who may need some support. And it could be something from there may be a death in the family, and a parent has reached out to ask a counselor to check in with a student. It could be that they need some peer help with peer conflicts, so the adjustment counselor is working through with the student. So there's really, our adjustment counselors are there in all of the buildings. Like I said, they're bilingual in all of our buildings, and really to support our students. So that may be a one-on-one situation They're also at the younger levels, really teaching some coping skills. And when we think about mental health, sometimes we confuse mental health with mental illness, and mental health is really our wellness. When we think about physical health, if something's wrong, we go to the doctor, we have annual checkups at the doctor. And with our mental health, that's what we're really focusing on, is how can we help students develop these coping strategies while they're in school, while they're learning their academics, to really be able to be mentally well. And it could be something simple as, in some of the classrooms, our teachers do some mindfulness activities. So before starting a lesson, they may take a couple of deep breaths and teach the students, like before, entering a different situation, or, just clearing our mind, going from one subject to another, we take some deep breaths. That way we can be centered. We do a lot of responsive classroom work with our our elementary students. So we start out with a morning meeting and really a connection. It's all about building relationships and connections in the classroom and learning that skill. So again, it could be looking at their peers, asking them questions, learning how to listen. So these are all skills that help our mental wellness, right? So it's really teaching us how do we interact not only with ourselves and deal with our emotions, but also working with each other, and how do we advocate for ourselves. So these are a lot of things that are happening in the school systems. It's happening in the classroom, but it's also happening one-on-one when students need some additional support. We also have social workers who are part of our community, and the social workers are really there to work with families. So families are contacting our social workers daily, asking them questions about resources outside of school. It could be anything from a basic need to, what do I do when my child doesn't want to go to school in the morning? What are some strategies I can implement? Or, I'm really worried, I'm starting to see some signs that my child may be experiencing, some depressive symptoms, and it's more than just being sad. So our social workers are really there supporting the families and answering those questions and making those connections with the community. And then again, at large, it's really, the support that's there each and every day, and there are different levels of support. So we do have connections with our outside agencies who come in and provide that, maybe more support that our students need. But really, when it comes down to it, it's really those relationships that we start with our teachers and students, really supporting and making them feel welcome and having a sense of belongingness.
So you mentioned adjustment counselors, and you mentioned social workers. I know we have school psychologists, we have nurses, we have administrators, we have attendance supervisors. If I'm a parent and I'm looking for support, where would I go?
So I definitely would start off, and Josh, definitely jump in on this. If you're not sure who is in the building, definitely start out with your administrator, because your administrator will be able to guide you in the right direction. Sometimes families have relationships with the nurses because there's some medical needs, and so sometimes connecting with the nurse first. But if you're not sure, I always tell families, start off with your administrators, or if you're at the high school and you have a guidance counselor that your child is connected with, and from there they really can point you in the right direction of who they should get some help from.
Okay, great. Josh, if you could talk to us a little bit about how SEL and mental health services and supports are playing out at the high school level.
Sure. To extend on what Lisa said, I think it's helpful to talk about it in two different ways, right? What are we doing to try to promote mental health? And then how are we trying to respond to students that are struggling with mental illness? And I think we have a long way to go on both fronts. I think we're also doing some good work on both fronts. So with regards to promoting mental health, one of the things that we are trying to talk more about as a leadership team and as a faculty and in one-on-one conversations is trying to help classroom teachers resist some of the pressures that they feel to provide an academically rich experience in making sure that they're not shortchanging relationships and community building. And that can involve some really simple things. Like, as a classroom teacher, am I managing class in a way where I'm confident that after 15 or 20 days in the classroom, all of my students know each other by name, right? Am I managing our time in a way where 20 or 25 days into the school year, not only do all my students know each other by name, but all of them have worked together on something in my classroom, right? 30 or 35 days into the classroom, into the school year, do we get to a place where all my students know each other by name, All of my students have worked with one another in the classroom, and all of my students have started to get to know one another, not merely as sort of students, but as people, right? And I think that if we are organizing the academic experience in a way that is all academics, all business all the time, and we're not being deliberate and intentional about promoting relationships between our students, we're falling short in terms of promoting mental health. As Lisa said, the foundation of mental health is human relationships. And we have to be, it's my belief that we have to be more deliberate about that now than we used to be. I think that as students came back to school after they were home during the pandemic, I think adolescent development was disrupted in really fundamental ways that we're still struggling to understand. And many students' peer relationships and the development of those peer relationships have been interrupted in ways that children hadn't experienced before. And I think they need adults to be structuring places like classrooms in a way that's helping them repair that. Because again, if that doesn't get repaired, it's hard to be confident that our students are going to be healthy and well. And we know that relationships are the foundation of mental health. We, on the other side of the coin, trying to support students that are really struggling with mental illness, we've been concentrating recently on really trying to build systems and supports that help students who've been out of school for a long time make a successful transition back to school. Because we know that that's really hard, particularly at a high school program where academics are moving at a pretty accelerated pace. And if you miss 20 days of school because you were in the hospital and you got to come back into your chemistry class and you just missed 20 out of the first 40 days, that process of being able to get up to speed and keep pace with the class is a really, really challenging one. And I'm very, very pleased that just this year we started our new Bridges classroom, which provides I think a really excellent support system for students as they transition back to school after they've experienced an extended absence. And that could be extended absences that were due to a hospitalization, or maybe in some cases, and this is what Vic deals with regularly, students who maybe don't go into a clinical setting, but are bunkered down in their homes for an extended period of time and not in the classroom. So we never want to give up on students, and we never want students to feel like it's game over and that they can't get back into the game if they've been on the sidelines for a long time, but they need our help in doing that. And so I'm very pleased with the work that my colleagues are doing in the Bridges program right now to help students make a successful transition back to school if they've been missing a lot of school. And then the last part that I would add that Lisa, I don't think you mentioned is that one of the things that Lisa and her team works really hard at is making sure that our students who need ongoing clinical counseling, who are not able to access it outside of the school day, can access it during the school day. So we have a lot of partnerships with local agencies that Lisa leads to bring clinicians into the school building, and so students can access that clinical support during the school day. If we could wave our magic wand, we wouldn't do it that way because they're missing some class time in order to access that clinical counseling. But if it's that or nothing, it's way, way better that students are missing some class time to access that clinical counseling. So we have folks in our team that are doing clinical counseling work. We have outside providers that are coming into school to provide clinical counseling. It's not realistic, and I don't think it's appropriate to ask the schoolhouse to be a full-service clinic. But we also got to be pragmatic, and we got to recognize that if students need clinical support and they can't access it outside of school, if we don't bring it into school, they're not going to get it. And there's no reason to think that they're going to be successful in school if we can't help them deal with some of the profound mental illnesses that many of our students are struggling with.
And that speaks to kind of the crisis around access to health care, and more specifically access to mental health care that I think we're seeing everywhere. Mm-hmm. What are we seeing? I'm going to direct this one to Lisa first. What are we seeing in terms of a correlation between mental health issues and attendance?
So we're definitely seeing our students who are struggling coming to school. It's really rooted in anxiety for a lot of our students. And sometimes the anxiety could be, a situation when I'm talking with families, I look at it from a continuum. So we want to get this when it's early, right? So sometimes it could be simply there's a presentation and the student is afraid to get up in front of the class. And so then that sort of starts the momentum, right? So now the student is anxious, and sometimes that doesn't come out as being or as clear as that. So, maybe that's the reasoning, but there's some physical ailments. So the student starts by saying like they're not feeling well, they're not able to come to school. And so sometimes we see a lot of that. So the anxiety around some sort of performance. Sometimes our students are anxious about coming to school because they have separation anxiety, and that can happen, at younger students as well as older students who've had some traumatic situations that have happened in their lives. So sometimes just the fear of leaving the home because something bad may happen. Sometimes when there's a death in the family and there's a single parent, some students have struggled with, if I leave my parent, am I going to be able to see them again? So there's a lot of trauma sometimes surrounded why students are not coming to school. Other times it could be the social pressures like Josh talked about. Students sometimes socially may have some kind of conflict going on, and that sort of starts the process. So there's been some situation that prevents our students from wanting to come in, and so as we know, oftentimes what happens when we're anxious, it's easier to avoid than to really push through the anxiety. So that kind of is the minor and where it starts with the students. And then that becomes a coping mechanism for students. So every time they're anxious about a situation, it's easier to stay home and avoid than it is to come into school. So sometimes we do see students that are really, really struggling because this has been a pattern of behavior over a long period of time. And that's where, Victor and the counselors and the administrators are really coming in to play to say, what really is going on and how can we help you? And I think it's important, going back to that continuum, we always stress with parents, I know everyone wants a mental health day, we all deserve a mental health day, but when you start seeing the pattern of this, it's really important to really sit down and find out what is really going on and reach out to the school system and say, this is the situation, how can you help me? Because the more we're not pushing into that anxiety and helping our students push into that, it just creates a bigger and bigger problem of avoidance. And we do a lot of normalizing. Everyone is anxious, everyone gets stressed, but how can we acknowledge those feelings and take those steps forward to overcome that to get to school? And who are the supports in school that you can reach out to when you're feeling like that to help you really ground and center and going back to those coping strategies?
So, Josh, I just asked Lisa about kind of the correlation between mental health and school attendance. What about the correlation between school attendance and academic achievement? I know you've done some work around that.
Yeah, it is extraordinarily high, and this, at least for me, and I think for a lot of folks, like, this just passes the common sense test, right? It is very difficult to do well in school if you are not attending school almost all the time. And we can quantify it pretty simply and pretty clearly. When students attend school at rates of 95% or higher, they almost always do really, really well in school. There's very, very few students who have attendance rates above 95% who do not do really well in school. The vast majority of students who attend school at rates of 90% or better are doing well in school. When attendance rates drop below 90%, it becomes very uncommon for students to thrive academically. And to take that percentage and to kind of convert it to days, which I think is a more helpful way of talking about attendance. A 90% attendance rate over the span of an entire year means that a student misses fewer than 18 days. It's a 10-month school year, and so that's fewer than 1.8 days or 2 days out per month. As a parent myself, and I've got 3 school-age children, listen, if there's extenuating circumstances and serious illness that means that my child needs to stay home from school for a period, it is what it is. There's some things you can't control. But I don't want my students missing more than 3 or 4 school days in a school year. And I know that if my students are not missing more than 3 or 4 school days in a school year, consistently year after year, odds are they're going to do great in school. And 95% attendance rate, this means that students are missing fewer than 9 days in a year. That's fewer than one absence per month on average. So good attendance is not a guarantee of academic success, but you seldom see academic success without really good attendance. Once in a while, you see students who struggle with attendance and they can do well academically, but that's the exception, not the rule. And I really want to stress to anyone who's listening, who's a parent, my hope for you and my hope for your child is that goal that you're looking for is fewer than 8 absences over the school year. That's less than 1 day per month, and if you can do that year after year, I can't guarantee you that your student is going to achieve academically at high levels, but I can tell you with the highest level of confidence that the odds are very, very much in their favor. And if your student can miss fewer than 8 days of school year in and year out, in all likelihood, they're going to be very successful academically.
So we're seeing the importance of academics in attend. Like if you attend, you tend to do well. Victor, why else is it important to attend school? What do you when you're meeting with families or students? What do you talk about?
I think I've learned over the last year or so, and like Josh said, it's intuitive, right? The more education you got, the healthier you are mentally, physically. You're probably going to be better off financially in the long run. So the higher you get in your education level, the better off you'll be. I think what it comes down to is forming good habits at an early age and making it, part of your everyday, like, drinking water, eating, right? What I try to tell most of the parents when I go to their house is you got to get into good habits early. You have to, make this a priority. You have to somehow come up with ways to get your child to go to school, and if you need help, just let us know what it is, and it becomes a snowball effect, right? Also, right, you get into bad habits, and like Lisa said, just keeps on growing in and of itself, and the idea is just to prevent that from happening, and you just have to make this into a good routine, a daily routine, so you can guarantee a better future for yourself and your family. That's the way, from my vantage point, that's the way I see it,
Kevin, can I add something?
Jump right in. Absolutely.
I think, parents and educators alike, we want to see students happy, right? We want to see them smiling. We want to see them laughing. We want to see them enjoying time with their friends. We want to see them feeling like they're part of the community. And I can say with the highest level of confidence that students who have good attendance at school and who are engaged with their peers on a regular basis and who are engaged in extracurricular activities are far more likely to be happy young people than those who are not. School is not always fun and pleasurable, but being with our peers and having positive relationships with our peers is like the cornerstone of mental health and happiness. And of course we want to see our students like thriving academically. We want to see them positioned to be successful after they move on from school. But in the here and now, we want to see them happy. We want to see them be happy, well-adjusted young people. And attendance isn't it's not the whole story as to like why some young people are happy and others are not, but it's a big part of the story. And I think for students to attend school almost all the time is putting them in a position where they're much more likely to be happy, well-adjusted young people.
And I would add, the attendance piece of it, that's the end product of the stressors that everybody's been talking about. You don't know what you don't know, right? The only thing we know is the behavior and what we see.
Yeah, so if someone's not attending, we know something's going on.
Something's going on
We're not
here.
sure quite what it is.
Right. So I think that, again, it's an end product of all the societal things we've been kind of touching on here today.
So let me follow up with you, Victor. What does an attendance supervisor do? Who do they interact with? What does your day look like? What kind of activities are you engaging in regularly? The public wants to know.
And I'm learning as I go. But yeah, so what it's turned out to be is me and my partner checking attendance, getting to know the kids, who's out frequently, talking to all the counselors and the teachers and the administrators, and pinpointing the students who are, problematic, that, maybe that's not the right word to use, but those kids who are absent more frequently than others, and basically knocking on the door and trying to find out, hey, how can the school help you? What is it that you need? And just trying to build that connectivity between the family and the school so they feel comfortable. And, some of the families we've been dealing with are newcomers. So, they don't know how to maneuver they come from another country.
So the systems are different.
The systems are different, exactly. The systems are different. Maybe they come from a place there is no system. Mm-hmm. So all of us, they're like, what's this? So we try to bridge that gap. So that's turning into some of that. A lot of it is that. And part of it is, given the laws of the state of Massachusetts, students are required to be in school between the ages of 6 and 16. And if they're not doing that, then we have to sit down as a team, make a determination whether we're going to file a child requiring assistance petition with the juvenile court. And that's the bad part of the job, right? Because nobody wants to do that. That's the last resort action. So that's part of the job. And while we're in court, try to explain it to the judge what's going on, what we've done as a district or as a school to provide assistance and try to ameliorate the problem that's been going on. And the judge then takes an array of actions that they have at their disposal. So that's pretty much what we do.
So you're also working with like the principals, you're working with
we're
guidance, you're working with Lisa and her team of social workers and adjustment counselors.
Yeah, so
talk about that collaboration that happens a little bit.
So, like I said earlier, we're, and in essence, the eyes and ears for the administrators, Lisa's teams, in the community. We're the ones who are knocking on the door. We're trying to find out what's making the family tick, what's going on with that family. We're getting into the weeds, as it were, to try to find out what it is that they need to remove the obstacle to get their children to school. Some, whether it be, we deliver winter clothing, food, so we assist with that. And yeah, that's, we're a conduit. We're the go-between, in essence.
And you're building a lot of relationships over
And
the course
building
of
relationships, well, right, like I said, we're, and a lot of the stuff that I've been reading is, there needs to be some level of connectivity between the family and the school and the community at large to make these newcomers feel like they're part of, the American experience. I don't know how else to put it, right? As you guys probably know better than me, given the circumstances of some of these families, maybe they don't value education, so we got to try to, change the mindset of that. And that's kind of the hardest part I see is, trying to do that, saying, hey, you came here for a reason to this country, and you have an opportunity here to advance your family. And it gets real deep sometimes talking to them, and so yeah, that's what we've been doing.
And so, Josh, if you want to jump in, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
If you want, I'll comment first and ask my question.
Yeah. One of the things that I think we've seen some initial evidence of in the work that Vic and Dillison have done together is for some of our students and families that are struggling with attendance, and I don't want to say all because it's not true for all.
Right.
For some of our students and families, having someone from the school take the time to meet them on their turf, express concern about their child's progress, monitor their child's progress, and follow up with them when the child's missing more schools. For some of our families, that alone brings about significant changes in student attendance, right? And I think that's very telling. Vic just mentioned that families need to experience some connectivity with the school. Right? I would love to be on a first name basis with the parents of all 1,280 students at Milford High School. It's not going to happen. And truth be told, it's not equally important for all families that they have an individual connection with someone at the school, right? For some families, if their experience with the school is a little bit more distant and transactional, their children may be no worse off as a result. There's some families where if they do not have a human being with a face and a name that they know and have a little bit of rapport with, right? The school just becomes this institution. It's not human beings. It's this place, and it's this kind of faceless institution. And this relatively kind of simple step of having someone from the school become known to the family and know the family, in many instances, that alone can bring about really, really significant change. And it is so important that we have people like Vic who can communicate with families and parents in their native language. Working across language barriers is profoundly difficult. And when we have colleagues like Vic who can communicate, particularly with immigrant families, in their native language, that goes so far to building trust and establishing rapport and in breaking down barriers. And the other thing that I want to comment on that Vic spoke about is that a lot of what Vic and Dale do is diagnostic, right? They're trying to talk to folks and figure out what are the challenges that you're facing right now? We want to help. It's hard for us to know how to help if we don't understand what you are struggling with. And I think as Vic has seen, it is amazing what people will tell you if you ask.
Yeah.
And
true.
We have many families out there who are eager to have someone who will listen, and eager to have someone who is willing to try to help them as they navigate these challenges that they're facing as parents. And for those of us that are not sort of out of the schoolhouse and in the community, it is invaluable to have people like Vic who come back and say, listen, there's some stuff about this family that you didn't know right now, and I need to teach you what I just learned so that you, as the guidance counselor, or the adjustment counselor, or the assistant principal, can not only be sensitive to what this family is facing, but to try to work with them in a targeted way to address the challenges that are specific to them. Because the challenges that are keeping kids out of school, there's some patterns that we see across families. But every student, every family's got a unique constellation of challenges, and you need people like Vic and Dale who are going out and getting to know folks and understand what their particular challenges are, so we can try to partner with them and do right by them and do right by their students.
So, Lisa, let me kind of jump on what Josh just said. I'm hearing relationships. I'm hearing different things work for different folks. I'm also hearing at different grade levels, there might be different interventions that might work or different strategies that might work. In terms of if you had a parent come to you as an elementary, say a kindergarten, first, second grader, and said, hey, I'm really having a hard time getting my child to come to school, what advice would you give? And Vic, I'm going to come to you next on that same question.
So I think just starting from the beginning and trying to bring the family in and having a meeting with, not only myself, but also the school-based team is so important to just kind of try and understand what's happening. But sometimes with our elementary school students, it's simply, what Josh talked about is that connection. does the student feel like they belong in the school, and how can we create that sense of purpose for the student? So sometimes we have our elementary school students, we give them an important job. So they know when they come in the morning, they're, responsible for, the lunch count or some role that really gives them that sense of purpose. And sometimes it's just a small situation like that. We had one, going back to what Victor was talking about, we had a student who was missing school, and as we were starting to uncover the situation with the family, we found out it was because the student was a walker, and by the time the student would get to school, his shoes were wet. And so that was the biggest situation that we were dealing with. So just providing the student with a pair of rain boots. Again, the attendance wasn't perfect, but we saw definitely a change in the attendance. So it's really, I always say to families, connect with the school, and as a team, you can sit down and really figure out why the child is struggling and how can we get the child here in a way, like I said, what is the sense of purpose? Has a child connected with someone who, I always ask students, especially, when I go in and I do some lessons at the younger level, I'll always say, who is the one person in this school that you can go to if you have a problem? Or who's the one person in the school that you like to talk to as an adult? And really making those connections is so important to them. So really, I say to younger families, get connected with the school early. Let's sit down and see what strategies, again, some simple thing can really make a difference. But going back a little bit to what Victor was mentioning, in Victor and Dale's role too, they're really educating, because sometimes families don't know that there are services and people in the school system that can help. So sometimes they don't know there's social workers, or they don't know about the counselors, or they don't know they can talk to their administrator about these situations, and sometimes there's a little bit of fear. So I think really, in their roles, they're going out to educate families, bringing them into the school, saying, we're here to help, and we can create this partnership with you.
Mm-hmm. Vic, what would you add to that?
From my background, when I worked at the courts and all of that, and I've said it to you guys, what I see is, for some families, especially the English learners and the newcomers, schools, public schools have become social service agencies to a greater extent. And those social services, the problems that the social services, try to fix, ameliorate, are the stumbling blocks that prevent kids from attending school. That's the only way I can make sense of it, right? So, in our roles, and again, everything I've been reading and learning and all of that, just try to, just be human. The way Dale and I go about it is, we just try to be humans, and, we can somewhat relate or understand what you're going through, but at the end of the day, it's I can't make your child. That's your job. So how can that rub? How do we I don't know how to say it in English.
Say it in Spanish. We've got a
How do you smooth that transition? How do you make that? How do you make that 28-year-old single mother with 3 children who's worried about the roof, food, electricity, and everything else, get out of survival mode so her children have a better future? That's what we try to kind of do. At the end of the day, that's where the rubber meets the road, And I'm ever grateful, and I know Dale is too, is, we're learning from some of the best people in the community. And, that's kind of like where it's at for us.
Kevin, if I can
jump
add
in
something.
and
You asked Lisa, what advice would you give to an elementary school parent whose child's struggling with attendance, right? And Lisa, your response is, come in and talk with us, right? So we can get to know you and we can get to understand. I 100% agree that that's the right advice. The other piece of advice that I would give, and this gets back to something that Dale said earlier, is that you got to elevate this to the top priority level, right?
Yeah.
If you are struggling with your 6 or 7 or 8-year-old child, I'm telling you that's nothing compared to what you're going to see when your child's 16, 17, or 18, right? So if you can partner with the folks at your children's school to help move things in the right direction for your young child, that is going to pay dividends for a long, long time for your child. And if these challenges do not get addressed early, the difficulty of addressing those challenges as the children enter into adolescence and young adulthood is much, much higher. So I don't want to say that it's easy to address these issues when children are young. I will say that it's much less difficult to address these challenges when children are young. And as they enter adolescence and adulthood, the challenges become much, much harder to address. So there's a window of opportunity when children are young that, we want families to really try to seize upon. And if families see that their children are having a difficult time with their mental health, with school attendance at an early age, that they are doing everything that they can to proactively engage with the folks at the school so that we can work together to help their children. I don't want to be overly dramatic about it, but I think the truth is it's very high stakes with little ones. If we get it right with little ones, the table's set for success. And if we struggle to get it right with little ones, it's going to be a struggle for a long time.
And I think it's going back to breaking that cycle, right? So right from the beginning, if we're addressing it, like Josh said, and we're able to stop those, bad patterns of behavior from building, then they are going to be successful. We are going to put some interventions in place, and we're really going to uncover those things much quicker than we would, as they're getting older. So it's definitely like breaking that cycle and establishing those good behaviors and those good patterns, and helping the child to see, if I am worried about coming to school because of something, I can go to school and I have my people there that can help me. And it gets a lot better, instead of, again, when we talk about anxiety, the more that you avoid, the more anxious you become, and that's that snowball effect. Now I'm not going to school, I'm worried about what the students are going to say, I'm worried about the academics, now I'm 2 weeks behind, how am I going to ever catch up? So if we can get that right at the beginning and prevent that and lean into the discomfort a little bit, it's going to help the students as they get older.
Just to reiterate this in different terms, I want to remind parents that as parents and as educators as well, our influence is highest when the children are youngest. Right? And with every year that they get older, our influence gets a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller. So we got to strike when the iron's hot, right? And if we're seeing challenges when children are young, we as the adults need to recognize that this is the moment when we have the highest level of influence, and we got to see this as the urgent matter that it is, and we need to apply a lot of energy and effort to working together with other adults to try to make sure that the kids are getting what they need.
So, as you're seeing success stories and barriers, what? And I'll throw this out to anybody who wants to jump in and answer this. Where do you see a pattern where you see hey, I think we're gonna have a successful outcome, versus where do you see hey, these are some of the barriers that prevent a successful outcome from occurring? And you can, Lisa, if you want to talk mental health or attendance, and I'd say Josh too, and if Vic, you want to more focus on attendance, but what do you see? Hey, these are the conditions that lead to success. These are some of the things that get in the way of that success from happening when you see an issue arise. I don't know, Vic or Lisa, you want to start off, and then we'll kind of go.
I think it's all how you present it to the parent, right? I mean, focus on the positive. These are the benefits, meaning these are the benefits that you have if you do attend school. Better health, but you communicate it as opposed to communicating it in a negative. If you don't do this, this is going to happen to you. Right? I think something as simple as that.
So you try to focus on more the positive aspects of
Yeah.
let's get to school, let's welcome you back, as opposed to saying
Yeah.
if you don't do this, this is going to happen.
Right. Yeah, and that's, I mean, in my short experience, that's what I've been learning, that tact is is, works a lot better,
Okay.
you know?
Going along with that, I would say working as a team is so important, and that's where we've seen, when we have our success stories, when not only is the school team working with the family, but outside providers, we're all working together with the student, right, to create this plan to help them be successful. And sometimes, it takes time. I always talk about, when we're looking at progress, what we see in our mind as progress, sometimes, it goes a lot slower. But as long as we're seeing steps in the right direction, it's so important. And so as we're seeing community partners come together, we're seeing families and school systems are coming together and working with the student, we are seeing that success. And, maybe, when we're thinking about like an older student, maybe the student hasn't been coming to school and now is starting to come to school, for half a day, and that increases from half a day to a full day. So we're definitely seeing, when we're seeing steps in the right direction, it's because a team of people have come together to provide the wraparound support for students that they need, both inside of school and outside of school.
We want to recognize and celebrate that progress too, consistently, because it is important. Like I think you were talking earlier about, small problems suddenly become bigger problems and bigger problems, and if we can get those problems smaller and get the student into school and engaging, like Victor was saying earlier too, you have better like long-term outcomes. I don't know if you want to add anything, Josh.
Yeah, I think with regards to like the factors that we see in the success stories, when we're working with older students, and I'm not going to say this isn't true with younger students, but I'm going to speak about what I know, what I've got the most experience with, which is adolescents. Mentorship is oftentimes the central part of the success story, right? There is one adult who is able to form a kind of relationship with the student where the student gains a confidant, where the student wants to please that adult, where the student, as Lisa was saying earlier, will go to that adult and ask for help when they need it. When students have a relationship with an adult at the school that serves as that mentor, they're not necessarily labeled the mentor by the student. I'm talking as we sort of see it, right? As the adults in the room. We're like, hey, like that's a mentoring relationship that has happened between that special education teacher and that student on their caseload, or that math teacher and that student in the math class, right? Or that coach and that student athlete on the coach's team, right? I think mentoring relationships are oftentimes a common theme that runs through our success stories. I think in terms of some of the barriers that we see that are most profound, I think that access to healthcare in the community is a really, really tough hill for us to climb. When students are dealing with physiological health problems and psychological health problems that they cannot get treated in a timely manner, we know why they're missing school, and we know what they need to get in school, and we can't make it happen, right? There are real constraints that we face in our efforts to try to provide students and families with access to healthcare services that are an essential component of them being successful in school. And I think another barrier that's a really formidable one for us to take on is we have a subset of our students in the Milford Public Schools right now that are not with us for very long. We have a significant number of students who will come in to our schools after the school year has begun, and we have a significant number of students who will exit our schools before the school year has ended. And when we're trying to help young people who are dealing with intense challenges, like this is long haul work. This is measured in months and years, not days and weeks. And sometimes we see young people, they need a lot of help. We want to give them a lot of help, and they're just not with us long enough for us to make a discernible impact in their life circumstances.
Yeah, and if you look at any data of kids who are with us from, or students who are with us from kindergarten through 12th grade, the outcomes tend to be very good. When we have students who are here in October and November, there's not a whole lot we can do, like Josh was saying. So what I'd like to do is, we just have a few minutes left. If I give each of you, I'd say 30 or 40 seconds to like share something you say, like, hey, I want to make sure that this comes out about either attendance or mental health that hasn't been asked yet. We'll go Lisa, Victor, and then we'll let Josh have the last word. So about 30 seconds, something that maybe you want to make sure you share on air today while we're talking. Lisa?
I just want to reiterate to the families out there, it's so important to reach out early. And even if it's something, they think is really a minor issue, really get connected with the schools as early as you can. If there is a problem, reach out to your administrators, reach out to the counselors, have those conversations and really start developing plans for students when they're younger, because we do want to catch this, because we know that when there are interventions in place, there is great success. So just reaching out, getting help, and really seeing yourself as part of the team, that we all want the same thing. We want the success for your child, so please reach out if you need anything.
And Victor?
Kind of stole my thunder.
She tends to do that.
Communicate with the school. There are dedicated professionals that have dedicated their lives to make a community stronger through the education of your children. And the only way that can happen is if the kids get to school and we can help you reach your family goals.
And Josh?
So I'd say specifically at the high school level, I think it's impossible to overstate the benefits of participation in extracurricular activities at school. And those benefits they cut across so many different areas of the student's life. Their mental health, their attendance, their academic performance, their happiness, their connection with their peers. Not everyone who is involved in extracurricular activities at the school is thriving. I don't want to oversimplify it. But when you look at students that are thriving in school and having an excellent experience at school, so often the most positive part of their school experience is in the extracurricular life of the school. That's where they are enjoying their time with their peers the most. That's where they are most likely to find those mentoring relationships with other adults that we spoke about earlier. It's where they develop a sense of belonging and community. So extracurriculars, it's, I wish we could come up with a better term, because we don't want to conceive of it as something extra. I think we want to conceive of it as something essential, right? That when students are involved, whether it be music or theater or athletics or clubs, whatever it is, when students are involved in the life of the school after dismissal at 2:25, we see just a host of benefits accrue to those students. And I can't overstate the importance of participation in extracurricular activities to students' overall success and wellness.
All right. Well, I want to thank Victor Canino, one of our two attendance supervisors, Lisa Kincaid, our social emotional learning director, and Josh Otland, the principal of Milford High School, for joining us on this very important conversation related to mental health and chronic absenteeism. This is going to be part of an ongoing conversation we're going to have throughout the year on a variety of topics, and I want to thank you for joining us in that conversation today. Thank you.